I've mentioned before that I've finally started catching up to Jojo. I've loved it so far, and Part 9 seems like it's going to be awesome too. Johnny and Joseph are my favorites, by the way. And naturally I've come to see that some stands in the series are absurdly powerful, with some having their own crazy hacks. And of course with them having those powers and hacks, people are going to start comparing Jojo's characters to other series. Giorno, for example, is one of the most popular to do so with, due to the nature of his stand and his powers. So since I'm into Jojo now, and I run a Dragon Ball channel, with Goal Experience Requiem, could Giorno actually beat Goku? Or vice versa for that matter. Some think that his hacks alone are simply strong enough to stop Goku completely, or at least cause a stalemate. Others say that Dragon Ball characters are so strong that they could just bypass hacks like this or just completely ignore it. That, or Goku is simply too strong for Giorno to even stop with those hacks. But what would the actual outcome be? We're going to be delving into the abilities of Giorno and his stand, specifically Gold Experience Requiem, as well as discussing the current canon abilities of Goku. Obviously if it was Goku versus Giorno, he could just fart and kill Giorno like that. The gap in power between their normal bodies is absurd. However, Gold Experience Requiem brings up some interesting things. Is it truly unstoppable, or is Goku too powerful for it to overcome? And just as a quick disclaimer, this video isn't going to be me giving an opinion on what I think would happen. This goes for a lot of power scaling things, but especially with this one, a lot of it's up to interpretation. I'll discuss a few different outcomes, but mainly here I'm just compiling all the data together, and letting you guys infer for yourself. Feel free to discuss in the comments what you think, but just keep it civil please. I know these debates kind of get heated sometimes. I'm simply here to compile all the data together, and not trying to influence your interpretation of it. So let's start with GER and its abilities. First, for Gold Experience Requiem stats, we could theorize some things based on statements. The most obvious thing to look at is the stat chart for it, where all of its stats are rated as none. Not because it has 0 of these stats, but because its stats are incomparable, according to another statement about it. And there's two ways we can interpret this. The first interpretation is that it's actually incomparable because of how strong it is, which means that its abilities transcend every other stand. So with this interpretation, that means Gold Experience Requiem would have infinite speed, since within its own verse, it would surpass Made in Heaven and Notorious B.I.G. Notorious B.I.G. could hypothetically reach infinite speeds if it needed to, and Made in Heaven actually did reach infinite speed at one point, even if it's not constantly at infinite speed. Plus, both of those stands are actually rated as infinite speed on their charts. So with this interpretation, Gold Experience Requiem would be above both of those, meaning its speed would be beyond infinite. And with this logic, Notorious B.I.G. also has infinite range and stamina, so Gold Experience Requiem would have the same. It can't get tired, and it can reach pretty much anything. As for attack power, Star Platinum is consistently stated to be the strongest stand, although there's an argument that Red Hot Chili Pepper could also be the strongest once it reaches its full potential with electricity, but either way it would be above both of those. Which isn't actually incredibly impressive, because if we're talking about that, that means it's only above large building level, in terms of raw attacking power at least. And as for developmental potential and precision, those stats aren't really going to be too relevant here, but of course with the same logic, Gold Experience Requiem would also have insane developmental potential and precision beyond Star Platinum and other A-tier stands, likely much higher than that too. But like I said, this is one interpretation of it. There's another way to interpret this chart and this statement. Rather than it having abilities beyond all the other stands in the verse, this can also be interpreted as the stand being so powerful that other stats are irrelevant. In other words, the ability of Return to Zero is so strong that it doesn't really matter what your speed, strength, or whatever is, because Return to Zero would just put it at 0. Keep both of these interpretations in mind too, because it's going to be important later on in the video, and I covered them first here for a reason, because the context will be relevant throughout. Now let's talk about the actual abilities of the stand, as well as some misconceptions with it. So of course, Gold Experience Requiem can manipulate time and reality, and it might also be unaffected by those same things. It was able to activate and erase time after all. Gold Experience Requiem also doesn't need to touch things to affect it. Another really overpowered hack it has is the fact that it can manipulate fate. Fate is a force that appears sometimes throughout Jojo, and basically means that something is guaranteed to happen. Diavolo's ability to Epitaph could actually predict the future, and it's stated that the predictions of Epitaph are fated to happen. It could foresee a guaranteed event. In Gold Experience Requiem, it could affect those events. It can manipulate that. That fate, it could be overwritten. And in some cases, that fate can't even be reached, like when Diavolo was killed. Bringing me to the next ability, which is the Death Loop. Now this is probably the ability that's brought up the most, although it's kind of misinterpreted sometimes. If Gold Experience Requiem kills its target, then they won't ever reach their death and will just die infinitely basically. This is what happened with Diavolo. However, this is misinterpreted as an innate ability. Like people think that if GER touches you, you get thrown into the Death Loop, but that's not necessarily the case. The way it's explained is that GER actually needs to kill someone for it to actually activate the Death Loop. Now of course for Diavolo this was a pretty easy task for it. But keep this in mind too, because the Death Loop isn't something that just happens by being touched by it. Although there is one more ability that GER has that could help it with this. As part of Return to Zero, it can manipulate pretty much anything to have never happened. For example, if an attack comes towards it, it reverts the attack, so the attack never happened. It's been stated that it could revert the strength of an attack to 0, and make it so the attack essentially never occurred. Also an interesting fact about this, one statement does say that it's able to revert the will of someone to 0, which we've never seen an example of this within the actual story itself, but it's interesting to keep in mind if this statement's true. So now that we've covered Gold Experience Requiem, let's go over to Goku. First by talking about his stats. Now, we're not going to spend too much time scaling Goku's strength in terms of attack power and durability since, come on, even if you try your best to lowball Goku, you can argue that he surpassed Jojo characters in terms of durability and attack power pretty much as a kid. And as for current Goku, it's not even a contest. Which is why I said before, Goku could literally fart and kill Giorno, and that's not an exaggeration, he probably could just breathe on him and kill him. However, stamina, speed, and precision are actually important to compare here. On top of that, the actual hacks of Gold Experience Requiem need to be compared to what Goku can do, so we'll be covering these ones. In terms of stamina, this is an area where Goku might be outclassed. He doesn't have infinite stamina. Even when fighting at his peak, his stamina is lower than that. Sure, his stamina is impressive, and Dragon Ball actually does have a few characters with infinite stamina, but Goku's not one of those characters. This might not seem too important, but it is relevant because if the match is a stalemate, ultimately Gold Experience Requiem could tire out Goku. That is, if Goku has no way to surpass it at first. So we'll need to touch upon the other statements too. As for precision though, this one's a little bit tougher to scale, but it's still relevant. We're talking about a guy that has the ability to auto-dodge attacks, and then a stand that automatically activates with great precision. Goku, of course, is a master of martial arts, and with Ultra Instinct, his body can accurately and precisely move any part of it that it needs to, without Goku even needing to think for it. And if Gold Experience Requiem is the most precise stand in the series, they might be pretty much on par with each other in terms of precision, with both of them not just being precise, but also automatically precise. As for speed, this is probably the toughest to compare. Scaling Goku's speed honestly requires its own video to discuss, and I actually do plan on doing exactly that in the future. But to keep it brief, let's put it like this. Goku at the very least goes up to a finite massively faster than light speed. But there are some arguments that place him at infinite or immeasurable speed. Trust me, I really would love to cover this in this video, but then the tangent would be longer than the actual video itself. So for the sake of this discussion, we'll keep it like this. Goku can be massively faster than light, but if we want to highball him, we could say he's infinite plus. And I'll use both of these speed stats later on when I discuss the conclusion. But there is another thing we need to discuss first too. Probably the most important thing here is the fact that Goku can't even see Gold Experience Requiem. Well, maybe. Stands are described as a manifestation of one's spirit and one's will. And while you might think, well, spirit's part of Dragon Ball too, it's a different type of spirit. Spirit in Jojo is explained differently than spirit in Dragon Ball. At the very least, Goku most likely can't see Gold Experience Requiem with his eyes. That much we could pretty safely say. Although you can argue that he might be able to sense it somehow. And that's the best case scenario for Goku because even if he can sense it, he won't be able to touch it. And just like the circumstances for Goku's speed, I'm going to take these different circumstances into account too. Because now that we have everything covered at a baseline, let's put it all together. This brings us to the consensus. Now, don't take what I'm saying as gospel. Like I said in the beginning, the goal of this video is to compile everything together that I can. Basically providing you with all the resources and info that I had on the subject, and seeing what conclusion all of you guys can come to, rather than trying to make my own opinion and force it onto you guys. But personally, I think the most important thing is the extent of Gold Experience Requiem's manipulation. And the outcome of this fight would depend on your interpretation of this. Is Goku's power simply too much to revert to nothing? Gold Experience Requiem was only used once after all, and even with all these statements, this really just applies to Jojo. The strongest characters in Jojo don't even come close to a fraction of Goku's suppressed base power. So, can Revert to Zero even affect these abilities? Affecting time and fate and everything else is one thing, but whether or not Return to Zero is actually limitless and can affect things like ki attacks, that's a little bit more ambiguous. Maybe in the world of Jojo it could revert anything, but can it take on a ki attack from a guy that can destroy 5-dimensional structures? Can this ability really extend that far? It can't be said for certain, but think of it like this. Let's say Goku launches a maximum power Kamehameha at Giorno, and it would be at Giorno because he can't see Gold Experience Requiem. And let's say here for the sake of this argument, Goku can't reach infinite speeds, but Gold Experience Requiem can. So it even outspeeds Goku here. But in this case where it reacts instantly to it, first of all, would ki go right through the stand, or would the stand be able to touch it? And if so, would it have the power to actually revert this ki to zero? It is life in a way after all. Or would ki work completely differently here because it's in a different verse? If we take all the statements about Gold Experience Requiem at face value, then yes, it should be able to revert this attack to nothing, and having no power at all, or having not happened in general. It might even be able to make Goku not have the will to attack in general, assuming it truly can revert willpower to zero. But it really comes down to a question of how you interpret Gold Experience Requiem's abilities, and the statements regarding its stats, and how ki interacts with stands and vice versa. So in my own conclusion, I can see these outcomes happening. 1. Goku's attacks can't harm the stand, because it can't touch the stand, and its speed surpasses infinity. And it's able to revert all of Goku's attacks. But the stand isn't strong enough to harm Goku due to his durability, therefore can't Deathloop him either. In this case, stalemate. Number 2. Revert to Zero has a limit, or for some reason, it can't affect ki. Goku has ways to kill Giorno with any type of attack here, because either his durability or attack power completely surpass what GER can revert. In this case, Goku wins. Number 3. Goku's willpower to attack actually is set to 0, and he simply just doesn't fight Giorno. Giorno wins by having Goku forfeit, or if Goku is completely off guard, Giorno could find a way to kill him after he forfeits, pulling a sorbet or something. This is the most ridiculous one in my opinion, and in this case, Giorno wins. Number 4. Goal Experience Requiem's speed isn't infinite, and it can't be activated fast enough. So despite the stand being automatic, he gets blitzed by Goku before the stand even activates. Goku wins in this case. And number 5. Goku is able to kill Giorno somehow, but despite this, Goal Experience Requiem is able to activate automatically, and reverts everything so this never happened. And this cycle basically repeats with Goku not being able to do anything, being worn out completely if he keeps going, or leading the match into a stalemate, with neither of them really winning in this case either. So, at least with those scenarios, a stalemate seems most likely, and it depends on the extent of Giorno's hacks and his raw stats, which are all relatively vague and up to your sole interpretation of it. In a perfect scenario for Giorno, where we absolutely highball him and lowball Goku, there is a chance he can kill Goku, but it is more likely that Goku would defeat him, even without seeing or sensing the stand, since he'd just go for Giorno and Goal Experience Requiem would have to defend him, but by far the most likely outcome would be a stalemate, mainly due to Goal Experience Requiem not being able to harm Goku, and vice versa, with the hacks being good enough to protect it, but not much beyond that. But with all this in mind, let me know what you think below. I was curious to cover this because I love both series, and I'm not trying to underrate either of the characters or overrate them for that matter. I thought it would simply be interesting to compare both of them here like this, since it's fun to dig deeper into both of these series and look at how their powers work. Anyways, if you liked the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to hit that bell icon so you're notified about any future videos too. All that really does help out the channel, and I appreciate all of your support. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.